Hey there everyone. Today I would like to discuss Sandra Bartky's essay on psychological oppression, which can be found in this Blackwell Feminist Theory anthology. What's really productive about this essay, and the reason that it continues to come back into my head and seems necessary that I explicate it here, is that Bartky so astutely yet simply analyzes the psychological dynamics that restrict women from being able to express their autonomy, and dually, their inability to locate a singular, exclusive locus of domination. That it's not always easy to point the finger at one spot, because as Bartky wants to show, domination does not merely happen from without, but it codes and compels from within. Therefore, Bartky's entire essay is really structured by post-Marxian and post-Freudian conversations about this kind of stuff, because Marx understands, for example, ideas as a product of material conditions, and that a superstructure is created by a material base, which, when the material base changes, when the material circumstances compelling entities changes, then their capabilities and qualities and capacities for recognition and self-consciousness change as well. And Freud similarly wants to understand the present conditions in culture and society that fragment the ego, but also allow for a sort of tentative reconciliation between people, a way that we can form stability in societies, families, relationships, and communities. And Bartky wants to understand how some of these psychic forces can turn around and impel women rather than compelling them. Rather than compelling them to express and accept their autonomy and their equality to men, it reduces and impels them to turn inward, not in a self-reflective way, but in a shy, meek, and mild way, in the worst way possible, that leaves women open to oppression. Hence, she wants to try to analyze, as she calls it, psychic alienation. Now, the reason an essay like Bartky's is so important is that because whenever we want to talk about a question concerning women's liberation or women's empowerment, take sex work, for example, a lot of factors need to be taken into account. Is a decision coerced or not? And as a corollary, is it autonomous or not? What are the material, economic conditions that compel a certain discourse to exist in the first place? For certain codes to proliferate and certain expectations to be taken as the norm, if not natural? All of these are key if we want to understand how are both men and women to react ethically to something like sex work, for example. Is sex work permissible? Is it a means of liberation of female bodies? Or on the other hand, is it a way to play into patriarchy? Is it a way to achieve a sort of false reconciliation that is on the terms of patriarchy? Therefore, Bartky wants to understand how the psychologically oppressed becomes their own oppressors, how they come to exercise harsh domination over their own self-esteem. And therefore we get, for example, I see this with like a lot of female influencers who want to play into like the traditional gender roles, right? They want to be the housewife, and this is their whole platform, is acquiescing to a particular clothing standard, a particular behavior standard. You know, you're the doting wife that stays at home and waits at home, awaits your husband to come home from work, and then you care for them, and when the husband is gone, you're caring for the kids. So, right, it's all about this compulsion to care, but in a way that is not always reciprocally recognized. And a lot of feminists are very keyed into this idea that men are often having their communities oriented around exertion and dominance, whereas women have theirs structured around care and submission. And care, of course, has positive connotations, but care can also have certain negative connotations insofar as it represents an acquiescence to a structure that does not always consider, indeed possibly rarely considers, the genuine well-being of women. Therefore, she wants to focus on two aspects of female psychological oppression, which she calls fragmentation and mystification. Fragmentation being the splitting of the whole person into parts of a person, which in stereotyping may take the form of war between a true and false self, or in sexual objectification, the form of an often coerced and degrading identification of a person with her body. Mystification, secondarily, being the systematic obscuring of both the reality and agencies of psychological oppression, so that its intended effect, the deprecated self, is lived out as destiny, guilt, or neurosis. This is really interesting because we see here a systematic attempt to disenfranchise women by attacking the very idea of female subjecthood, of female personhood. Because as many contemporary continental philosophers have been eager to stress, these concepts of subjecthood and personhood are not innocently present. Who is considered a subject of an ethical or juridical discourse? Who is considered a person, therefore worthy of consideration in these discourses, is certainly not simply present. Rather, it is a political effect. Because, right, think of, for example, when the United States is founded. Who gets the right to vote? Well, only certain people. Only certain people are considered full persons enough to be considered citizens who can partake in civil duties like voting. And it has to be white, landowning men, right? So we can see that women are not considered, neither are African American men or women. And there's a certain class expectation here with the landowning element, right? So all of this is playing into a restriction of the idea of personhood, not based on biology. That's the important thing. Because historically, it has been attempted to show that, for example, Aristotle is going to say that women, well, they're not quite human like men because they don't fully have the capacity for rationality. And Aristotle calls mankind rational animals. Rationality is what separates them from any other animal. But Aristotle is not willing to say that women have rationality, so they're in this sort of weird double bind, this liminal space where they have to be human enough to be worth our consideration, but not human enough to be equal to men in terms of their governing capacities. So, right, there's a very slippery slope happening here, where women, Bartky wants to point out, are going to be fragmented and, I might say, reduced to merely their body, whereas men are going to be elevated to some sort of transcendent capacity for judgment, for rationality, for governance, for autonomy. And these are supposed to be somehow above the body, right? Something more than the mere body, that men aren't just bound to their emotions like women are, right? All of these are stereotypes that serve to reduce and therefore fragment women's capacity for autonomy. And then this mystification is going to prevent the identification of that strategy even happening. It's going to make it where women say, well, no, this is just naturally what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to do all this labor, which I'm not recognized for, which is not even economically considered labor as such. It's just considered stuff you're supposed to do, right? Like caring for kids or doing the laundry or cleaning the house. This isn't labor that women are remunerated for, right? So all of this is a means to minimize the work and severe quality of expectations and quantity of expectations forced upon women, and thereby prevent them from being able to take a stand and say whether or not they want this. And Bartky wants to explain that the truncated self I am to be is not something manufactured out there by an anonymous other which I encounter only in the pages of Playboy or the Ladies' Home Journal. It is inside of me, a part of myself. And I think this is really interesting because it speaks to the experience of a lot of women that I know who struggle with this alienated sense of trying to figure out, how can I best empower the women around me? How can I take the responsibilities that are bestowed upon me as an educated woman in the 21st century, with someone who has certain privileges that the women in the past haven't? How can I express myself in a way in which I positively contribute to a progressive discourse for the liberation of women? This is not always an easy place to be. Because on the one hand, you want to accept your femininity, that One does not have to be masculine in order to be autonomous, or worthy of ethical consideration, or considered an equal subject. But on the other hand, one doesn't want to reduce oneself to a sense of femininity which is so historically tainted. Because Bartky says that we cannot be autonomous, as men are thought to be autonomous, without in some sense ceasing to be women. And what she's saying here is that the way womanhood has been historically theorized, defined, and lived out is such that women have not seen autonomy as a central element of their discourse, of what they're told they should aspire to be. Historically, women haven't been told that they should want to have a career or be a girl boss or be dominant and assertive. They've been told that what it is to be a woman is to be submissive, to be in a lower hierarchical state below and subservient to one's husband. So as such, if we want to try to wrest femininity from its shackles and try to bring it to the light of some sort of revolutionary day, well, how can we do that if the terms upon which femininity has been enacted historically is very much not simply one that would be conducive to liberation? Furthermore, Bartky says, unlike a colonized people, women have no memory of a time before the masters came, a time before we were subjugated and ruled. Right, so part of liberation of women entails a sort of contemporary creation of a space where women are no longer under the thumb of men, where there are spaces where women have achieved some sort of autonomy, some sort of equality, where we're back to a time before, but not in a conservative regressive sense, in the sense where we have reconstituted something that may have never really existed, that it may have been the case that patriarchy is so deep in the history of the world, so ubiquitous, although not exclusive, right? There are matriarchal societies, but patriarchy has been so pervasive in human history that it's not as if women can just, in terms of trying to orient their liberatory capacities and movement, it's not as if they can just look back to some time and say, this is what it was like before, let's get back to that. No, what it is to be a woman has been so thoroughly tainted by patriarchal discourse that it's not so clear to see oneself as participating in a discourse where they are on equal footing. The example that Bartky uses is catcalling. And she says that, okay, when I'm catcalled, I must be made to know that I am a nice piece of ass. I must be made to see myself as they see me. There's an element of compulsion in this encounter, in this being made to be aware of one's own flesh. Like being made to apologize, it is humiliating. She calls it a ritual of subjugation. And right, these cultural codes are properly ritualistic. They take on a sort of religious, ubiquity, right? I don't think I've ever met a woman who hasn't been catcalled at some portion of her life. And I'm 20 years old. I haven't lived on the earth that long. So it really speaks to the pervasive nature of women's reduction to their bodies and the idea that oftentimes women are just told to take it, right? And not to take it being their sense of self, their autonomy. No, take it is the disenfranchisement by men. Not because they recognize it as something politically oriented, contingent, that can be changed, but that it's just something natural, that therefore you couldn't do anything about, even if you could get to the bottom of why it's there. Here I think Bartky really gets to the bottom of why women's liberation has been such a contentious and continually discussed issue. Why it's something that's still on our plate 35 years after she writes this essay in 1990. Because psychological oppression is dehumanizing and depersonalizing. It attacks the person in her personhood. I mean by this that the nature of psychological oppression is such that the oppressor and oppressed alike come to doubt that the oppressed have the capacity to do the sorts of things that only persons can do, to be what persons, in the fullest sense of the term, can be. The possession of autonomy, for example, is widely thought to distinguish persons from non-persons. But some female stereotypes, as we have seen, threaten the autonomy of women. Oppressed people might or might not be in a position to exercise their autonomy, but the psychologically oppressed may come to believe that they lack the capacity to be autonomous, whatever their position. So we can see that relating to one's capacities as someone who has something that they can do ethically and politically is not simply a question of facing up to the facts, so to speak. Because, as Joyce says, every telling has a tailing. Every mere tabulation of facts is told, spun in a tale in such a way that it is irremediably fictive and constructed. And this process of mystification that Bartky is speaking to is such that it tries to diminish this element of fabulation, as Deleuze calls it. This fonction de fabulation that is so central to the way that culture works, that the socius codes people not from the outside in, but from the inside out, such that they are in their very core fragmented, diffuse, right? Embodied in places other than their bodies and therefore submitted to their bodies. She says, in sum then, to be psychologically oppressed is to be caught in the double bind of a society which both affirms my human status and at the same time bars me from the exercise of many of those typically human functions that bestow this status. Right? This goes back to the Aristotelian sort of double bind, that liminal space where, okay, you're kind of human, but I don't actually give you the means by which to actually properly exercise that humanity. So it's like, of course, Aristotle didn't think women were fully rational because they didn't have any of the educational means, or they weren't in an acceptable position where they even knew that equality was an option. So of course women themselves too thought that this was just natural, that they were somewhere between man and animal. To be denied an autonomous choice of self, forbidden cultural expression, and condemned to the immanence of mere bodily being is to be cut off from the sorts of activities that define what it is to be human. A person whose being has been subjected to these cleavages may be described as alienated. Alienation in any form causes a rupture within the human person, an estrangement from self, a splintering of human nature into a number of misbegotten parts. And this is where we are today. And I would argue that it doesn't just happen to women. This is a much larger societal world problem of fragmentation that I've discussed on the channel before, but especially for women and other disinherited, marginalized, subaltern groups. They're not placed in a position where they know what it meant to be constituted as whole. There may have never been a time where they have been constituted as equal persons, as persons, properly speaking, able to express those capacities. And they also can't even discreetly delimit what are the fragments of myself that could be, that I could turn into something that makes sense, that is coherent. Because so often, women are in a place where, in order to construct themselves, all the pieces they have can only come together in a contradictory way. In a way in which the parts are at war with oneself, such that even once one accepts the battle of wresting their autonomy from men's commodification into their actual self, even then, there is the secondary battle of trying to get rid of these disparities between the elements as they've been coded by patriarchy. And I think Bartky's essay is really good at, again, very succinctly, very simply, and yet nevertheless very profoundly explaining these psychological dynamics. So that being said, that's it for this lecture. I hope it's been somewhat interesting in thinking about these topics, really, get you thinking about what women's lib would look like. You can watch any of my other videos I've done on postmodernism, German idealism, gender theory, post-colonial studies, and other classic literature. You can also become a channel member for $5 a month and gain access to, among other things, a private philosophy Zoom, which I do the second Sunday of every month at 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern. You can get help with any sort of philosophy problem that may concern you. I also have super thanks if you just want to donate one time to the channel, because books are not cheap and I really appreciate anything that anyone gives, but no pressure. That's it for this lecture, and I will see you in another one.